My name is David Nuremberg. I'm the director and Leon Levy professor here at the Institute, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to this program From Text to Song, Schubert as Translator, which is part of our exploration of the arts here at the Institute. It's difficult to know how to introduce our guests. If I use only words and not music, I've already failed, but I don't want to assault your ears with my singing. So I'm going to say just a few words about Brian Zeger. For a fuller introduction to the treasure house of his gifts, I refer you to the program that you were handed upon entry, and then a few more words about the program. So Brian's concert career as a pianist spans the globe and has brought him into collaboration with many great vocal performers, including our previous guest in this series, Joyce DiDonato, who will be returning to the self-promotion here, who will be returning to the IAS for another director's conversation and masterclass on May 3rd. Since 2004, he's been the artistic director for vocal arts at Juilliard, where he somehow also finds time to produce recordings with major labels, perform regularly as a chamber musician and as a much-desired guest at music festivals, and pursue the translation of music into words by writing critical essays for magazines and journals. Among his many recent recordings, I'll mention only the one that might be most directly relevant to tonight's program, A Lost World, Schubert's Songs and Duets with vocalists Susanna Phillips and Shen Yang. Like all of us here at the Institute, Brian is also dedicated to training those who will carry on, as our founding mission statement puts it. Before leading Juilliard's vocal arts program, he served 10 years as the artistic director at the Steens Institute at the Ravinia Festival, and for 8 years as the executive director of the Metropolitan Opera Young Artists Development Program. There's more, much more, but for that I refer you to your programs, and then I wish to turn for just a moment to the fascinating topic Brian will introduce us to. So ancient philosophers and mythographers already wrote about the relationship between words and music and the different ways in which they move us. And contemporary neuroscience scientists do so as well. I think of Oliver Sacks, who came to the rather unsurprising conclusion in his Musicophilia, Tales of Music and the Brain, that, quote, there are major differences and some overlaps in representation of speech and song in the brain. Within music itself, there's also a long tradition of exploring the question of the relationship between words and song. Sticking only to opera, think of Salieri's Prima la musica e poi le parole, first the music and then the words. An opera in one act, staged in 1786, and so that the words don't get jealous, I'd better add that the libretto was by Giovanni Battista Casti. More recently, Richard Strauss dedicated his last opera, 1942, Capriccio, with a libretto inspired by Stefan Zweig and written by Clemens Krauss, which is a story about a countess, Madeleine, pursued by two lovers, a poet, Olivier, and a musician, Flamande. And they demand of her a decision between them, which is more important, words or music. That opera hasn't had great success, perhaps because it does have a lot of text, or because it's more than 2 hours long with no intermission, and in fact, its first American performance was at Juilliard in 1953. All this simply to say that the question of the relation between words and music and how to translate between them is a deep and difficult one, as anyone who has ever tried to describe music with words already knows. So I will only add that in some ways, it's similar to other questions we wrestle with here at the Institute. Maybe this is more self-promotion. And as humans more generally. For example, the objects of thought in formal and axiomatized languages of logic and mathematics are very different from our words and objects of thought in our natural languages or from real objects in the physical world, yet we translate constantly and fruitfully between them. How that translation works, with what gains and what losses, or whether it can even be called translation, those are also deep questions. In fact, historically, the question about mathematics has been intimately connected with the question of music. The idea that the human response to music is the product of the mathematical proportions of the cosmos, the music of the spheres, is one of the earliest products of Greek philosophy and endured until the Enlightenment. How will Brian pose and answer the questions posed by the translation from text to song? I don't know, and I can't wait to find out. In the meantime, let me just leave you with Strauss's conclusion. His opera ends with the Countess Matilda singing alone of her unwillingness to give up either of her lovers. Brian.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor for me to be here with my colleague Jared Werlein. We are thrilled to have this occasion to talk about Schubert with you, and I look forward to a lively discussion after our presentation, so please save up your questions, because I would love to learn from you as much as you learn from me. We're going to focus on two songs today. They're both from Schubert's last years. The first one from 1826. He died in 1828 at age 31. I might note, if you think of what this man accomplished in this brief lifetime, it's beyond belief. And we're going to look at how he grappled with the poem that was in front of him. You know, when a composer reads a poem, they have a visceral reaction, and then they have every conceivable kind of decision to make. What's the structure? What kind of voice is it for? Is it just voice and piano, or is it multiple instruments? I mean, everything has to be conceived musically as a reaction to what they see on the page. So we'll be talking about poetic structure, how stanzas turn into musical strophes, and the point is that when you listen to a song, really any song with words, you're getting a multi-layered artistic experience. You're getting verbal text, but that verbal text is subsumed in a musical structure, which to my mind, and maybe I'm prejudiced because I'm a pianist, I think is much, much more powerful than the words, in the sense that, for instance, if 5 composers set the same poem and you heard the 5 pieces in a row, you would have 5 completely different experiences, because the musical language is such a powerful conveyor of meaning. And we'll try to get at kind of how that works. So the first piece is Im Frühling, in the spring. What a beautiful day to present this vernal song. It's from 1826, as I think I said. And the poet is very interesting. He's a man who's now is actually perhaps best known as one of the poets that Schubert set. Schubert set 10 of his poems over the course of actually a short period at the end of Schubert's life. His name was Ernst Schulze. He himself died at age 28. I think we should have a trigger warning for today's presentation, because actually all the artists we're speaking about, the two poets and Schubert, none of them made it out of their early 30s, which is quite extraordinary when you think about it. Anyway, Ernst Schulze was a very troubled, passionate poet, very much of the Sturm und Drang movement, storm and stress, late 18th, early 19th century. Very, very highly keyed emotionally, volatile, constantly falling in and out of love. And it's a complicated story, because he fell in love with a young woman called Cecilia van Tixen, who died of tuberculosis at age 18. He then transferred his affections to her sister Adelheid and became obsessed with Adelheid, although he didn't really know Adelheid, we don't think. And he became what we would now call a stalker. It's a crude term, but he became absolutely obsessed with Adelheid, and in fact, to the end of his life, really dedicated his art to this love with this woman that he did not actually have a real-world relationship with. All this has a bearing on the poem we're about to hear. So he wrote a series of 100 poems, which he called Poetisches Tagebuch, poetic diary, and he has each one he dates each one like a diary. So this one was written March 31, 1815, and it's the 8th of the 10 Schubert settings that of the Schulze poems. And most of them are actually much more violent than this, but they all have to do with an unachieved love, a frustrated love, and in this case, a remembered love. So let me read the poem for you. I'd suggest that you have this in your in your program. I think maybe read along. And let's just notice that it's 6 stanzas. And what I'll give you a clue to your listening later on. What Schubert has done is he's taken these 6 stanzas and he's turned it into 3 musical blocks. So there's a block that's stanza 1 and 2, a block 3 and 4, a block 5 and 6. So let me read the poem to you. I sit silently on the hillside. The sky is so clear The breezes play in the green valley where once, in the first rays of spring, I was oh so happy. Where I walked by her side, so tender, so close, and saw deep in the dark rocky stream the fair sky, blue and bright, and her reflected in that sky. Stanza 3. See how the colorful spring already peeps from bud and blossom. Not all the blossoms are the same to me. I like most of all to pluck them from the branch from which she has plucked. For all is still as it was then. The flowers, the fields, the sun shines no less brightly, and no less cheerfully the sky's blue image bathes in the stream. Now we come to stanza 5, the third section, which is the most philosophical. Only will and whim change, and joy alternates with strife. The happiness of love flies past, and only love remains, love and alas, sorrow. Oh, if only I were a bird there on the sleeping meadow, then I would stay on these branches here and sing a sweet song about her all summer long. So you see, the poem is about a kind of paradise of past time, which the speaker of the poem tries to recover by going back to this beautiful spring landscape where he was with his beloved, reenacting these rituals, plucking the flower, basically bringing her back to life. And it poses the question, how do we, who are suffering from an absence or a loss in the present, bring back a fuller time, a more loving time? How do we meld past and present? So let's hear the song, and then we'll talk about how Schubert, in musical terms, dealt with this challenge of how to meld past and present. Jared Werlein. I can't resist, because there's so many educators in this room, mentioning that Jared came to Juilliard out of high school 6 years ago and has become the wonderful artist that he is. Of course, these are all talents that he brought with him, but he will be next year full-time at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, right out of his master program. So did Schubert succeed at mending this rift between past and present? That's what I'm going to be talking about. And did you notice how the stanzaic structure of the poem, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, basically what Schubert came up with as a way to musically capture or translate this question of returning always to the same place with this obsessive need to heal this wound was a theme in variations. So let me show you. Here's the theme in its first iteration. It's actually kind of a double theme because it's both the piano part and the voice part, etc. So these both play out over the first two stanzas, which are primarily about his desire to visit this past place. Now we get to the end of that. Let me lay out the whole structure here. So we get to the end of that that first theme, and we get the first variation. It's the same music, but now I'm playing 16ths instead of 8ths, right? And up in a higher register. So it's got this kind of leafy, pastoral, springtime feeling of the, and now he moves into the present tense. Sieh, wie der bunte Frühling. Look how the beautiful spring is blooming all around us. He's gone back to this place where he used to tryst with his beloved. And but what he's got up his sleeve, what Schubert has up his sleeve, is a modulation. We all know that modulation is changing from key to key, right? So here I am in F major. This would be G major, which is moving up one tone. Watch what Schubert does. I'll play it slowly for you so you hear. This is nicht alle Blüten, so not all flowers are the same to me. My favorite would be to pluck from the branch that she plucked from. I'll show you. The home key. Sorry. Here we go. Now we're in a new world, right? New key. I would pluck from the branch from which she plucked. Now we're back. So when a classical composer modulates, they have two responsibilities: to get you to the distant key and to get you back. And it takes a master of chromatic voice leading to be able to do both of them so that they feel logical. They feel, I mean, I don't think any of you listening to that song thought, wait a minute, chaos has intervened. No. There's a kind of inner harmonic logic, but Schubert, I think, in response to Schulze's poem, was seeing the incredible yearning of this narrator to enter into this past world. He wants to live in the past with her when he was happy, when they were together. So let me show you again, even a little more slowly, how the voice leading works. So here we're in the home key, not all. Here's the first. That's the signal of the new key. I would pluck, now we're in the new key, but listen to this. That flat, if he did, we can merrily go along in the new key till the end of the song, but that would violate every classical rule. You can't do that. So he's got to find a way back, but of course, the way back is also emotionally so truth-telling, because of course this narrator wants to go back, he wants to live in the past, but guess what, you can't. So Schubert knew that. So he's saying, from the branch, we go to G minor, which is halfway back. Then, because now we're all the way back. Back in the ordinary workaday world we've been in. He does this 3 times in the 3 sections. Each time, it's got this amazing, for me, a kind of ethereal, elevated quality of bringing to life that magical world when he was with his beloved. It feels a little bit to me like he went from black and white to color. You know, and then to maybe a faded color as you get that one step back, and then you're really back. Okay? So this happens 3 times. We'll play the whole song again so you'll hear it. Let's see. Yes, so the song goes along, then of course you hear that there's this major disruption. For the philosophic 5th stanza, which is really the one where he says that joy and strife struggle with one another. This is really the crux of the pain of love. And now, because we're in the tonic minor, he has to make a different kind of modulation, but it has kind of the same effect. I'll show you. Here comes Liebe, Glück, and only love remains behind. Again, this halfway back, love and sorrow, and oh, such sorrow. So this is what a composer has in their arsenal as tools to vary the color palette and to show these different emotional worlds that a protagonist can move through. But it's very seldom done with the kind of mastery that Schubert has, because as you listen to the song, it's got this inner kind of logic. It's very tuneful. It's got this beautiful kind of pastoral surface to it. But underneath that, there's so much complexity. The other thing to mention, of course, is that the storm that happens is a completely different texture of music for me. I have these violent syncopations in my right hand. This really makes us think of the Sturm und Drang, this storm and stress. And the left hand, for me, this shows us how much Schubert listened to Beethoven. That's very Beethovenian. Schubert worshipped Beethoven. And of course, they died just a year apart, although Schubert was so young. So the combination of these syncopations in the right hand and the churning left hand tells us something of the cost to the speaker of this lost love, which is really profound. Then for me, the truly magical thing happens, which is that the 6th stanza, the poet moves into the subjunctive. Oh, if I could just be a little bird and sit and sing of you all day. This is now the subjunctive tense. So we're not in past or present. And of course, I think what this touched on for Schubert was this word zang, to sing. What was Schubert if not a singer? And what did he not empower for these hundreds of years, if not wonderful singers? So I think seeing just this verb there, he said to himself, I've got to create a special synthesis here, which is going to really repair the wound of this loss. So what he does is he takes the syncopations, which were so powerful and so painful in the storm, and he moves them to my left hand, and they become sort of pacified. So he's acknowledging the pain, and yet through that we have the leafy, pastoral right hand. So he's integrating all his materials in this last stanza in this kind of effortless way, which I find just amazing. A couple of other details to mention in this song, which I find so touching, and so touching in Schubert's work in general, is that here he was writing in the very beginning of the 19th century, but he really had at his disposal all of those compositional habits and tricks and tropes all the way back to the Baroque era. So, for instance, kind of Italian ornamentation was at his disposal. So when the poet speaks about das Lüftchen spielt im grünen Tal, the little breezes play in the green valley, we get an ornamented version. Here's the plain version. Then the ornamented version. That's the kind of ornament that a Mozartian singer might have done on their own. But by the time we get to the 1820s, it becomes part of the compositional fabric. So he's able to draw on that whole tradition of ornament. And in fact, the ornament that really kills me is that famous flatted 6. I don't know what that means to you, but he could, no, that's an appoggiatura. Again, tiny detail, but which becomes pivotal in moving us harmonically where we need to go because of this genius of voice leading. Is this all making sense? Good. I have to admit, it's hard to know. I know there's so many brilliant people in this room, but I don't know how much musical background people come with, so I'm trying to sort of mediate in between, but I sense a lot. So, but I think my major point really is the need of the poet to heal this wound. I mean, you hear it when I read the poem, and you see how this works out in Schubert's own composition. I want to also mention that this business of having a very placid, tranquil texture and interrupting it with something really violent is a real hallmark of a lot of Schubert's slow movements at the end of his career. If the great cello quintet, which is has this great cri de coeur, which just erupts in the middle of it. It's really quite violent, as this storm is. So I think Schubert again was kind of trying to acknowledge these two emotional poles. And Graham Johnson, who's a great pianist and commentator on Schubert, wrote a really interesting thing about these storm-like interruptions. He writes, "In such works, when calm returns, an echo of the catastrophe remains behind to cast a warning shadow over the recapitulation. We have learned too much to go back to our old ways, and now nothing can be the same." Very moving. But I think for Schubert, there's this crucial thing is this notion of being able to sing of her all summer. And when I say of her, there's one other little detail I want to mention. Everybody knows what a musical fermata is. It's a sign like this, which means we stop the rhythmic pulse and we allow the performers to decide when to go on. And it comes at a crucial moment. I would sing a song of her the whole summer long. And of course, the poet and the singer can't bear to get off that word. What could be sweeter than saying the pronoun her? We never do learn this woman's name. Probably quite an important detail for Schulze, who lived in an imaginary world. But anyway, we see the emotional investment in this her, this feminine ideal. Jared, let's do the song again. So I hope you heard more in it this time with all these details. I still, no matter how many times I've played this song, which is over decades now, those modulations they just kill me every time. There's this reaching for something more pure, more elevated, and then this inevitable falling back. It's very moving to me. I think there's an ordinance in the town of Princeton that you can't do an arty lecture without mentioning Proust. So here we go. In honor of Alex Day. It's impossible to avoid Proust if you're talking about the past and the present, because what is his great work about? It's about trying to escape time, trying to find lost time, and that's exactly what's happening in this song from Schulze way back in 1817, actually was the composition of the poem, the song in 1826. The composer is trying to defeat loss, I feel, by combining the elements of the storm with this leafy, vernal 16th note figuration in the right hand. The composer has found a kind of paradise through singing. You know, what would I do? I would sing of her all summer long. I can't be with her. We're not going to have children. She's not real, but she will be my Laura of Petrarch, or my, Odette in Proust. And here's a Proust quote about this. He says, "This notion of time evaporated, of years past, but not separated from us, it was now my intention to embody as clearly as possible in my work." So again, embodying this sense of transcending time, of timelessness, I find it just endlessly moving in this song. And also very, very moving for a man who died at age 31 of syphilis, which he knew he had. By his middle 20s, he was already really kind of under a death sentence. So the poignancy of this setting to me is boundless. Let's move now to a much simpler song on the page anyway, which is Die Krähe, the Crow, which is the 15th song out of 24 in Schubert's great late cycle Winterreise. Probably many of you know Winterreise. It has a kind of iconic, unique position in song literature for sure, and I think we can understand why. It's got an extraordinary kind of concentration to it. And just to set up the plot a little bit so you understand what the situation is, we actually know very little about the protagonist, even though we hear him telling his story for 24 songs, because it's very short on facts. What we do know is that he came to a village, he fell in love with a woman, she spurned him for someone else, and he suggests in the second song that her parents found her a richer husband. So he found himself rejected, and he decides to leave the town, and the other 22 songs are really about his journey into the wilderness, which is a suicidal one, or becomes a suicidal one. And for me, I think it's reached this iconic status, not only because it's incomparably great music, but because his situation is so isolated, so abstractly alone, that any human being can read their way into his story. Winterreise is often paired with the works of Samuel Beckett, and I think there's a common sense of kind of alienation, isolation, lack of human context. In fact, the protagonist of Winterreise in 24 songs never meets another human being until he meets or imagines this kind of crippled hurdy-gurdy player at the end, kind of at the moment of his death. And who knows if this is a real thing or not. He's been kind of raving for a long time by now. Anyway, here in the 15th song, the sort of central symbol of the song is a crow, who the the narrator imagines has been following him all the way since he left the town. I'll read the poem briefly to you. You can follow if you like. A crow has come with me from the town, and to this day has been flying ceaselessly above my head. Crow, you strange creature, will you not leave me? Do you intend soon to seize my body as prey? Well, I do not have much further to walk with my staff. Crow, let me at least see faithfulness unto the grave. It's very grim. It's very typical of the Winterreise poems in that many of them focus on one image and then take that image to become a symbol or a kind of emotional working through of the protagonist's suffering, of his isolation, etc. And if one hears this poem in German, I'll just read the first stanza for you to understand how the meter also really affects our reception of this poem. Eine Krähe war mit mir aus den Stadt gezogen, ist bis heute für und für mein Haupt geflogen. It almost sounds like a children's rhyme or a Christmas carol, something very, very regular, very simple, which puts me in mind of Emily Dickinson, actually the way that she uses an extremely simple, almost childlike sense of meter, and yet inside these very regular, sing-songy, childlike structures, there are bombs of meaning that go off. Here's just a stanza of Dickinson. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. And this extraordinary, visionary imagination in this very, very tight form. So I think when Schubert read this poem, I think what he saw was an opportunity to create something rather sing-songy, very simple and stark. For me, this is now song 15. It's just after the midpoint of Winterreise. The protagonist is already very, very lost, probably freezing to death already to some degree. And so there's a kind of numbness which starts to come in. And I think he took Wilhelm Müller, the poet's metrical regularity and metrical sameness and translated that into a kind of numb vocal line, which you'll hear. Shall we do it, Jared? Okay. For me, this song is so stunning in its simplicity. It's so stark. There's so few notes. And I'd say the first thing I would say about it, in terms of Schubert's translating that poem, is that this narrator has been alone for this whole time. We've been with him on stage for, I don't know, 45 minutes of songs. And this is the first time he has anyone with him. It happens to be a crow who is also perhaps checking him out to find out when he's going to become a corpse so that he can feed on him. That's in the poem, right? But what Schubert does is he puts my part way up in the treble, so there's a sense of loftiness. There's a sense of the crow is circling up ahead, maybe in the branches, but he's always there. There's this presence. And Schubert pictures this very simply by simply putting me in the treble, both hands in the treble clef. And the fact that when the vocal line comes in, we're doing exactly the same music. There's a sense of mirroring, shadowing, and almost identity. I think the narrator's gone somewhat mad by now, and he doesn't know quite where he stops and the crow begins. So they're exactly together on the same melody. It's unusual to have that kind of unison actually in this period of music. Normally, I mean, Schubert was an incredible contrapuntist. He would like to create polyphony and complementary lines when but he chose here to make this stark unison, which is so powerful. I want to show you some harmonic detail, which is really interesting. When the voice comes in, you hear these harmonies. But before it, when I have it, listen. That's a wrong note, but it's the right note. Again, it's the lowered second. It tells us something is not right, you know? This is not a Christmas carol. This is a song of a very deeply troubled man. Just listen again. Listen for that flatted second. It tells us so much to me about the protagonist's mental state. Here it comes. Something already is very much not right with this man. There's a sense of harmonic limbo a little bit, just briefly, just touches of it. And again, as I was saying about modulation, it always comes back. He doesn't take you into atonality by any means, but there's just that touch, that twinge, you know? So I talked about this kind of Dickinsonian regularity in the meter, but then Müller, the poet, completely breaks that. And by the second stanza, let me get the poem, excuse me. By the second stanza, we don't have these smooth lines. Eine Krähe war mit mir aus den Stadt gezogen. From the first, now we have Krähe, wunderliches Tier, crow, wondrous animal. Willst du mich verlassen? Meinst du? Etc. So now the line gets very, very choppy. It really brings to mind to me something very brilliant I heard quoted to me. I had the incredible privilege of working a lot with Bernard Greenhouse around the end of, after he retired from the Beaux-Arts trio. And he told me that in his first session of playing for Casals, and he was Casals' main kind of American protege, Bernie played he was a very young man and played all this music for Casals, and Casals said, I have one thing to say. Music is speaking and singing. Go away and come back in a year. Think about that and come back and say. So this is what makes me think, Krähe, wunderliches Tier. Here we've been singing this beautiful smooth line. Now suddenly we're speaking. So this is something always to listen for in listening to vocal music. How does the composer work with long phrases, choppy phrases? Why are they choppy? And what does a gifted singer do in the rests? You know, that make that really the same way that an actor will break off, make a pause, and what's in that pause? There's so much that you can fill it with anything, and every interpreter will fill it differently. But that's genius for me of Schubert to have wunderliches Tier. Will you abandon me? Now we're modulating. Meinst wohl, do you mean as prey to seize my corpse? So going back to the modulation we had in Im Frühling, here's another powerful one. We're in C major. He's ratcheting up the attention. Mindful. One more step up. Now you always have to get back, right? Now we're back. So it's a classic ABA form. We have very similar music. In fact, Jared's music starts out exactly the same, but in between we have this choppy, declamatory, confrontational moment between the protagonist and the crow, in which he said, "Hey, buddy, is your desire to eat me when I'm dead?" I mean, and then he says that's going to be soon. One thing about the protagonist's suicidal desires or drives is that they're threatened very early, and they get threatened in many different ways. They become kind of a dialogue with the world, in which he keeps threatening his own demise. And this leads me to the last point and talk about mastery of vocal register. We have this huge climax. He starts from a low A. Let me finally see loyalty to this. We've gone from a low A to a high E, which is a major 12th interval. It's very unusual vocal span. You need a really good singer like Jared to be able to do it, that has both the low and the high. So there's this big outburst, Treue bis zum Grabe, and then Treue bis zum Grabe. The first one is all defiance and anger and a kind of cry to the heavens. Are you going to remain loyal to me to the grave? And then, will you remain loyal to me to the grave? Of course, that's Schubert's repetition. That's not Mueller's. The composer does have the license to repeat text, but look, he repeats it in completely different meanings. The defiant suicide, or the defiant dying man, and the accepting, broken, dejected dying man. It's extraordinary what you can do with simple vocal range, right? In the hands of a master like this. And then, I spoke about starting up here in the heavens where the crow is. Look where I end up in the postlude at the end of the song. Again, flatted second. In the depths, in the grave. So we have traveled from the heavens where the crow flies into the grave. And many of the songs of Winterreise have that kind of movement. So these simple tools that Schubert had at his disposal in his great genius of register for the piano, register for the singer, harmonic details. Yeah, and we don't even mention his incredible tunefulness. I mean, that's sort of another thing. If you study a lot of people around this time, a lot of them had the same tools actually, but very few of them could write a melody like Schubert could. And what's extraordinary is there are well over 600 songs, which he wrote in his short lifetime. I mean, Winterreise is 24 of those. The output is absolutely staggering. It was often a couple of songs a day. And of course, that's not all he was writing. We understand that they're the great symphonies, the piano works, the chamber works, a whole bunch of operas, which nobody really even talks about, because they were all failures in different ways. But his real dream in life was to become an opera composer. And he never got it right. That was certainly the royal road to success in Vienna at his time. That's what would have meant real commercial success and fame. And had he lived, he was 31. Who knows? But there are a lot of failed operas that even today almost never get produced. They're kind of unproducible, unfortunately. But here we have these great songs. And look what he could do. How long is that song? 90 seconds? It's for me, such a portrait of human pain, of defiance, of acceptance. The whole range is there. Let's do it again, Jared. Sorry. Let's see. One sec. Okay.
Stadt gezogen. welches Tier willst mich nicht verlassen? Meinst wohl, Gottes Beute hier meinen Leib zu fassen? Nun, es wird nicht weit mehr gehen an dem Wanderstabe. Krähe, lass mich endlich sehen, treuer bis zum Grabe. Krähe, lass mich endlich sehen, treuer bis zum
You know, for me, this music is really fathomless. I've had the incredible honor of knowing these pieces since my kind of adolescent years growing up as a pianist, and had the opportunity to do them with a whole variety of people. Every partner you play with has really a different take. Particularly, I'd say the fewer notes there are on the page, the more individuality they bring to it, because it leaves them space to be who they are. I'm thrilled that Joyce DiDonato is coming, because she's one of the very rare female singers who have undertaken Winterreise. You know, there was kind of a strong musical tradition that it was a man's cycle, just like Schöne Müllerin. It is a man's tale, certainly in Müller's telling. But for me, it is also, it's so existential, it's so almost beyond personality. It's got such a cosmic quality to it that, in fact, Lotte Lehmann was doing it in the 1940s. Elena Gerhard were famous singers that were pioneers as women in doing Winterreise. And in our time, Brigitte Fassbender, and now Joyce has been a pioneer herself. She did it in Carnegie with Yannick Nézet-Séguin playing. So she's a fascinating figure. I hope this will, I don't know what her topic is, but ask her about it if you're here. When does she come?
May 3rd.
Okay, you got to promote these events, yeah. But it's been a real joy for me to delve into these pieces with you. I hope what I said was somewhat clear, and I look forward to having a dialogue about it.